And can I ask you a little bit about your background?
Sure. I mean, I grew up in New York City. My parents were artists. My father was an abstract painter. My mother was well, she's still alive. She was a book editor for many years and a writer. She was involved with the Beat Generation in the 1950s. She wrote a memoir called Minor Characters about her relationship with Jack Kerouac and growing up around that orbit of writers and artists. And then I dropped out of college after a couple of years. I started working in magazines and was editing a literary magazine, Open City, and writing for the New York Times Magazine and Esquire, and ultimately got the inspiration to write my first book, Breaking Open the Head, on psychedelic shamanism.
Yeah.
Came out in 2002. When I was writing that book, I began to learn a lot about these prophetic ideas that indigenous cultures possess, and that some psychedelic kind of Western philosophers like Jose Arguelles and Terence McKenna had been tracking. So that led the inspiration for the second book, 2012, Return of Quetzalcoatl, which came out in 2006-07.
Which is where I came in, to be honest. That's where I discovered your work, yeah.
And that book was quite successful. You know, a lot of people read it and caught the zeitgeist of the moment. Yeah. And then I started a company called Evolver that publishes a web magazine called Reality Sandwich, and does video teleseminars and has a space in New York called the Alchemist Kitchen.
Yeah.
Then here I am.
Your travels took you then to Africa initially.
Yes. So with Breaking Open the Head, I was exploring the shamanic traditions and initiations of different tribal and indigenous cultures. Mm-hmm. So I got an assignment to visit Gabon, where there's a tribe called the Bwiti who use a psychedelic substance called iboga that's now being used in the West as an experimental treatment for addictions like heroin addiction and alcoholism. So yeah, I spent a few weeks there, going through an initiation there, visited a tribe in the Amazon in Ecuador called the Sequoia. I visited the Mazatec Indians in Mexico, which is where we discovered psilocybin, the magic mushrooms, the 1950s.
Yeah.
And then for the second book, the 2012 book, I also visited the Hopi Indians in Arizona.
And the Kogi as well, wasn't it?
The Kogi I visited I wrote about them in the latest book.
Yeah.
I just visited them in the last maybe 4 or 5 years.
Right.
Yeah.
Just interviewing Bruce Parry 2 or 3 weeks ago, and he's just come out of this new film. I'm sure you know, but you've heard about it, called Tawai. And he returned to this tribe in Borneo called the Panan. I was just wondering whether there was a particular tribe or culture that you sort of connected with, that you felt a very particular strong connection to.
I really love the Sequoia people in Ecuador, and I've hosted a number of retreats with some of their elders in Costa Rica. Yeah. And I was definitely very struck by the Kogi. Also, more recently, I've done some work with the Shipibo in Peru. Mm-hmm. So yeah, still a lot more to learn, but I'm very grateful and lucky that I had these opportunities.
I think what you seem to be advocating in the book is not so much a kind of call to arms. It's a clarion call, but it's not so much a kind of call to arms. More of it's a transformative approach that's needed.
I think it's systemic, and we're like fractals of the whole. So we have to understand our relationship to the system. Yeah. We have to understand the system as a whole. And I felt that I wasn't really satisfied by the books out there, because you have books like Eckhart Tolle or Deepak Chopra, which is all focused on the individual, finding harmony and balance and maybe non-attachment. And then you have political books, political theory or left-wing books. I was trying to synthesize a whole bunch of different approaches and ideas.
Which you've done very successfully. It is that integration, isn't it? That's the challenge, I suppose, as well, of having this kind of perennial wisdom kind of meets, the if you like, the economic and realities of our time. It is that integration which is the tricky part, I suppose.
It's just like finding the right angle on things. That's kind of what I feel my job has been. Yeah. So, for instance, like, what's the right approach to technology? You have people like John Zerzan, who say we should go back to hunter-gatherer society. You have like Paul Kingsnorth, who thinks that we should reject, most modern technologies, or all of them.
Yeah.
And then we have the singularity people who are like, no, our only hope, like Stuart Brand, we need genetically modified organisms and nuclear power and, vertical cities and so on.
Mm-hmm.
So, I try, I think the truth is, from my perspective, is subtler and more complex. In that we can't reject technology at this point, even though I agree with a lot of what Paul Kingsnorth has to say. I do think we've created a progress trap where each new layer of technology creates more subtle, intricate problems that we then have to iterate again to try to get out of. So like plastics are polluting all the endocrine systems and causing cancers. So then we have to develop high-tech cancer treatments. Then the residue from those cancer treatments goes into the water maybe and causes more problems. So we were on this kind of like hamster wheel of progress, and we definitely want to get off that. But the question is, can we use some of the technologies that we've built, like our communication and manufacturing tools, to kind of find ways to save ourselves in a sense from otherwise what will really be ecological cataclysm, which is approaching quite quickly. So for instance, can we use drones to reforest? Can we, use our technologies to create gigantic kelp farms in the ocean to reduce the ocean acidification and create food for the vast populations that are still being born? Can we create, regen villages? These kind of ideas of these modular housing units that are manufacturable, like Walmart could manufacture them or whatever, and they have renewable energy and composting and aquaponics built right into them, so people could, become essentially self-sufficient.
Yeah.
Because the moment we don't, it's like the opposite. We've become very disempowered, and the whole capitalist system relies on people needing to have their needs fulfilled by these, distant corporations. So in a way, we have to reverse that logic and that ideology, but sort of paradoxically, we have to use the same technologies that the system has created to undo its logic.
Yes. I know you're a great fan of Mark Lanz's work, aren't you? And I was just wondering whether you could, I've just looked at it very briefly, but I was just wondering whether you could describe what it is. It's biocentrism, isn't it?
I'm not I don't know about a great fan.
Okay.
I like the book.
Yeah.
And he's a biologist who basically argues you're sort of seeing different people from different scientific disciplines saying, well, wait a second, the data that we're getting could actually suggest that there is like a universe of consciousness, or that somehow the universe is very fine-tuned to allow for us to have this experience as sentient organisms in zipped up in these meat suits. So yeah, in a way, it's his version of what Nick Bostrom is talking about as the simulation hypothesis. That somehow we seem to be in a universe that's designed to allow us to have these experiences of embodied freedom in a sense.
Right now, and I know that one of the things you talk about in the book was the work that's come out of the Stockholm Resilience Centre. With the planetary boundaries and so on. Would you mind encapsulating some of those?
Not at all. When we have a problem where, the mainstream lens for looking at what's happening ecologically has been climate change or global warming.
Yeah.
And it's a very one-dimensional focus, when actually we have to understand that we're making profound changes in all these different aspects of the ecosphere, the biosphere. So the Planetary Boundaries model, as you mentioned, was developed by the Stockholm Resilience Center, and they have 9 boundaries that they feel that humans really can't trespass without endangering our future. And we have already trespassed at least 3 of them. And those include, it's a whole list. Ozone, atmospheric pollution, fresh water, land use, climate change, species extinction. I might be forgetting 1 or 2 off the top of my head.
Sure, but yeah. One of the things that comes through also from the book is this kind of, the need as a society, and I suppose as individuals, also to have a vision, and for almost to be everything to be sort of re-envisioned. I'm not sure whether you're aware of the work of Frances Moore Lappé, who wrote a book some time ago now, The Diet for a Small Planet. And she used the example that she felt that in the West, in a sense, we're lacking a vision, that in a sense, we're so stuck with a model that seeing is believing, that she says, actually, you should put the cart before the horse, and instead of being seeing is believing, it should be believing is seeing, which puts the vision first. And that seems to be something that's, that we sort of are lacking with our, if you like, with our world leaders. And so I suppose the questions I'm asking is what you're seen to be encouraging too is for a new vision, basically.
Yeah, I mean, there are visions of our present society. I mean, and people, you're able to move mass populations. I mean, Trump's vision for the U.S. was we're going to go back to coal and, the sort of golden age of manufacturing of the 1950s.
Yeah.
Neglecting to note that those jobs don't exist anymore, that we have high-tech automation and more fields, that actually jobs are being eliminated left and right.
Yeah.
The technologists in Silicon Valley have kind of put out this idea of a kind of benevolent, patriarchal philanthrocapitalism, where, we can kind of trust them because they're going to take a lot of their money and do the right things with it. And meanwhile, we're moving towards this grand vision of a singularity where ultimately we're going to, merge with machines in some kind of seamless utopian fashion. I question that vision and try to offer a different vision, which is once again one that doesn't reject progress or technology, but suggests that maybe there's a great value in the diversity of ecosystems, the diversity of local communities, and that actually what we want is a kind of planetary confederacy where we have truly functional local democracies. We develop principles and ethics for financial exchange that honor the individual, the community, the sanctity of life. And we take the ecological crisis as our great opportunity to kind of reorganize our productive forces so that we're really not only dealing, with the immediate, kind of problems that we've unleashed, but also really taking care of it on a more long-term way by sort of redirecting our, our values, in a way too. Like, what if we wanted diverse local communities? And what if we wanted to make sure that, ancient indigenous cultures were protected and strengthened and given their autonomy within a framework where we were all aware that we're part of an interdependent whole, or we're part of one planetary superorganism, that we really have to take care of each other, just like the cells in a body take care of the body.